习近平总书记强调，到2020年现行标准下的农村贫困人口全部脱贫。
With the last mile of poverty alleviation ahead, China is ramping up efforts to make the final sprint.
The countdown has begun quite literally on this latest government website. The ambitious deadline set in 2015 by Chinese President Xi Jinping. But the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown a spanner in the works, and now questions are being asked if China can achieve its target of lifting millions of its people out of poverty by the end of this year. I traveled to one of the poorest regions in China to understand the challenges. Also in the program, my colleague Michio Ishida walked the streets of Tokyo to find out how the less fortunate are coping in one of the richest countries in the world. We're on a 6-hour journey by bus from Sichuan's capital Chengdu in southwestern China to remote Liangshan Prefecture, home to green landscapes and undulating mountains, but also some of the poorest in China, in part due to this harsh terrain. As China looks to eradicate absolute poverty by year-end, we've been invited by the government to visit Liangshan to see their ongoing efforts in this last mile and, of course, their successes so far.
目前，我省脱贫攻坚2步走3保障的任务已基本完成。
Our 3-day schedule is packed as minders usher local and foreign media from project to project, such as new housing estates for relocated villagers.
以前那个山上呢是平的嘛，我们现在走这个楼梯还是下去上来。
Schools. And even high-tech apple farms. We're told the government's approach is multifaceted, and local officials say they're confident of meeting the ambitious year-end goal for their province. At the start of the year, over 5 million in China still remained below the poverty line, which stands at an income of 2,300 yuan or $340 per year. But because this campaign has deep political and personal significance for President Xi, there's no room for failure.
还是谢谢共产党，谢老大，谢。
As we were chaperoned throughout, there's little time for our own exploration this trip, and I wondered about reports of those who had fallen through the cracks. But at times I found the conversations with those on the receiving end of the government's initiatives provided a glimpse into the ups and downs of what it meant to be poor in China. One such example is 39-year-old Zhou Juan. We met her at Qingshui village, one of the planned stops on the government trip. Her family of 4 is one of 200 over households who moved from their home in the mountains to this new government-built residential compound last year. They were deemed an impoverished household in 2014, but have since shed the label along with the rest of the village last year.
搬到这里的时候可以选房子吗？
不是，我们是那个抓那个蛋的。
抽签的。
好，抽签就是抽签嘛。
Miss Zhou's family did not have to pay a cent for their new home, but in exchange gave up a part of their land.
第一天踏入你的新房的时候，心情是怎么样的？
心情应该是很好的，因为怎么说呢，都改变了，然后到了冬天嘛，它就是那个瓦房你也知道的啊，进风嘛，到了冬天然后就很冷，有一点冷。然后现在这个都不是那么冷了，很好了已经。以前我们厨房是有一个大的那个火炉边上嘛，做饭、烧菜、做饭，就是那个有三个石头叠起来的，然后就烧菜嘛。现在都有这个了，很方便了，很干净了。之前我们是在外面的嘛，外面直接搭一个那个然后猪圈里面还关猪，然后外面就是厕所，就这样。现在的话很好，现在就在家里面了。
Earlier in the day, officials were keen to emphasize that the living environment of villagers has improved drastically.
Well, it may look like there's nothing much here anymore, but what officials want to show us is where villagers used to live before they were moved to safe housing. It's not easy to get to given the rainy weather and this slippery road, so you can just imagine how villagers used to live prior to moving to safe housing.
We were told this now abandoned house was one of the better ones in the village, and that more in Liangshan were being relocated. While happy with her new living environment, Ms. Zhou acknowledges there have been some trade-offs as well.
我们以前的地基很宽的，比这个肯定有3、4个宽吧。没办法呢，你1分钱都没出，人家国家给你修那么好的。
The family still has a small plot where they grow vegetables and rear chicken for their own consumption.
也没什么啥怀念的，哎呀，之前没出去打工的时候挺苦的嘛，就生活比较困难，家里面比较对经济来说是比较困难的，因为就靠了种那点土豆嘛，那个土豆才几毛钱1斤。
Since moving to the new community, many of the women, including the village chief's wife, work at a new vegetable base run by a Guangdong enterprise.
现在就每个月都是15号就发工资，之前是挖出来都是有香烟卖不出去，不管钱。
They earn about $12 per day, with some also getting rent from leasing out their plot of land.
他以前种植不像我们这样大规模的一起把它弄下来，它是，像他们种植只种花椒，还有就是土豆。第一个是成本高，然后还有一个销售不出去。但是我们现在进来之后，就是渠道还有就是电子商务这些都做得比较好。
Due to health issues in recent years, working at the vegetable base is not an option for Ms. Zhou. Her husband is the sole breadwinner and leaves the village whenever he can find work. Though, when the COVID-19 pandemic struck, these jobs dried up for a few months.
这打工又轻松，又没得那么跟以前样的在屋头的话，做活了这些样的很累啊，很脏啊。有时候有啊，有时候就没得。 打工了话，还最先没有找到活路的时候啊，就心头就愁这个还找不到活了，找了活了害怕又拿不到工资。
An expert on poverty in China tells me that finding stable employment remains one of the key challenges in ensuring rural folk stay out of poverty.
Given the vast differences in education in China, how qualified farmers are for certain types of jobs. At the same time, China is trying to move up the manufacturing kind of food chain, and as more technology comes in, it will replace jobs, but it will also require more and more qualification.
In the remote mountains and valleys of Liangshan in southwestern China, the majority of the people belong to the Yi ethnic minority group. Many are not comfortable using Mandarin and prefer their local Yi language, which can make finding work outside difficult. Authorities, though, have sought to address this through the next generation.
我们这里的很多孩子，他都是从那个跟着父母，这个小区建成之后，从那个山上，偏远的地方搬迁过来的。然后呢，就说父母这个语言，他们自己跟着爷爷奶奶生活，父母生活的那个语言的环境，就说普通话这一块比较差。现在我们小班的孩子主要是实施的，就说是双语教学。我们的那个汉语老师就用普通话给孩子先教学，然后接下来我们的那个老师会用他们本民族的语言，就是彝语，再给孩子翻译一遍。
At a kindergarten we visited in another housing relocation community, I was told that ensuring the quality of education also has its difficulties.
招聘的都是要求的是那个幼教专业的，这一点呢就限制了我们的这个老师招聘的这个困难。重点还是老师的待遇，幼儿教师的这个工作比较辛苦啊。这些年轻的孩子，他们就觉得外面可能打工呀这些的工资都比这个高。
Come the end of the year, China will likely celebrate its by all means remarkable success in eradicating absolute poverty in the country. But it will be a constant battle to ensure that people do not end up falling back into poverty when the spotlight has shifted to other goals. Ms. Zhou, for instance, says her family has no savings and all their money goes to paying her son's school fees. The family also has close to $6,000 in debt after a sudden disease struck and wiped out their goat herd a few years ago.
Certainly, life is getting better, but in terms of long-term challenges, you have everything from environmental challenges, densities of population. The attempt to use urbanization as a way out can also create lots of challenges, lots of problems. And then part of it is that poverty is so diverse. There's no kind of silver bullet that will help to reduce poverty for everyone. And then maybe another one would be unforeseen kind of challenges, natural disasters or COVID that disrupt systems that work pretty well in normal time.
孩子参加比赛啊，这边上这个，哇，他得奖了。
Perhaps most telling was when I asked Ms. Zhou if she had any hopes for her future. Without even a moment's pause, she said she had none, though she had more to say when it came to her children.
我2个孩子，我就盼他们走出这个大山。我不希望让他们就像跟我们一样嘛。所以说我现在大的孩子，他就说辍学嘛，哈，我就不要他辍学。我说你还是要读，不管他们干嘛，我都觉得还是送他们俩出去。但是我们2个待在我们这儿的话，我觉得没什么希望了。
Officials have stressed that eradicating absolute poverty by the end of the year is just the start of a long-term approach in dealing with the issue.
And it certainly is a long-term challenge, even as China promises to bring prosperity to its 1.4 billion citizens. But poverty exists at different levels, even in more developed countries, whether in the rural or urban setting. My colleague Michio Ishida finds out the harsh reality of the less fortunate in Tokyo.
Ikebukuro, one of the busiest train stations in Tokyo. A bustling part of Tokyo and a haven for fans of anime, the Japanese animation comics. But as night falls, a different side of Ikebukuro emerges. A site of Tokyo not often seen by visitors. Homeless in Japan, one of the world's richest nations. According to the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, there are around 4,500 homeless people throughout Japan, and the most number here in Tokyo. Kenji Seino runs a nonprofit organization that serves those living on the street. He was once a school teacher. An incident in 2002 was a calling for him.
私が勤めた学校のそばで中学生がですね、ホームレスの人を襲って殺しちゃうという事件が起きまして、それで私がこれは授業で取り上げながらあかんと思いまして、で授業作りをしたのがきっかけです。でそこでたまたまこの、地元池袋にですね、手の橋という団体があるということを知って、でそこで、そこに参加して授業もやってもらって、そこの事務局を担うようになって、今は代表になって。
Tenohashi was founded in 2003. Its name means a bridge that connects hands. It's supported by over 30 volunteers and funded by donations and government subsidy. It distributes regularly food and basic necessities to the homeless, help connect those who need social welfare to the local public office. Government efforts aided by organizations such as Tenohashi have seen the number of people living on the streets reduced over the last 2 decades. But some studies point out that the problem of homelessness in Japan is far from over. Arch, a citizens group who conducts its own survey of homeless people, said the actual number could be 3 times the government figure. is in recession, its first in 5 years. But unlike other major economies, the number of Japanese who lost their jobs due to COVID-19 pandemic are not as high. However, the situation masks millions of people here who are struggling to meet ends meet with temporary contracts. The situation, analysts predict, will get worse by end of the year. It's past 8 p.m. in central Tokyo. A and U, not their real names, are on their way home. It's not unusual for kids to go home at this hour in Japan, as many go to prep schools. I got connected to the teenage boys through a non-profit organization that helps underprivileged kids in Japan. I got permission from their mother to speak to them, as long as their identities are protected.
もともと静岡の田舎の方に住んでたんですよ。だからあんまバスとかもこういうお金払って乗ったことなくて、まあだからこういう都会に慣れることができたですね。
静岡にはどれぐらい住んでたの？
俺が13くらいまでは住んでた。
東京出たのはなぜ？東京出てきたのは？
分かってるんですけど、正直に話していいのか分かんなくて。
A and U have 2 younger siblings. Big families are very rare in Japan. One child is the norm. All of 4 are raised by their mother. I spoke to her via video conferencing. She doesn't want her identity revealed. I will call her Keiko. Keiko left Shizuoka for Tokyo to seek a job and a new life with her children a year ago after suffering from domestic violence.
まだ離婚は成立していないんですけれども、育児を放棄されているような状態です。で、向こうが浮気をして出て行ったっていう感じですね。もう全て払わないで逃げてます。もう私側の親戚はもうそんなこう父親としてやるべきこともやらない人はこう見切って一人でやりなさいっていう感じです。向こうの親戚は、まあ、知ったこっちゃないっていう感じですね。
COVID-19 has hurt her job prospect.
いろいろ給付金とかが出るので、それでだいぶ助かってます。
But the subsidies will not last forever. With 4 boys to feed and school, she needs a stable source of income. Japan's school system is notoriously competitive. To keep up with their peers, most children attend prep school. It's costly. Oftentimes, it's beyond the means of underprivileged children such as A and U. Not helped, they will be trapped in a poverty cycle. This prep school is funded by public donation. This is where A, U, and other children from similar social background receive private tuition free of charge. A third of the students here come from single-parent households. I'm going to meet the woman behind this free education initiative. Nice to meet you. How are you? Kids' Door was set up more than a decade ago. Every year, it takes in almost 2,000 children from Tokyo and Miyagi Prefecture. Yumiko Watanabe is the person behind this initiative.
これがチェックテストといって、これはまあ小学校低学年の？これね、実は中学生でまあどれぐらい勉強ができるかっていうチェックをするので。
Underachievement is a fundamental issue facing children from less fortunate families. Civic organizations such as Kids' Door are trying their best to make sure these children are able to keep up with the competitive Japanese education system. But Ms. Watanabe says the government needs to do more to help the less fortunate in the population.
子供が1人の時は、収入がすごく少なければ4万2000円ぐらい出るんですけれども、これが2人子供がいると、例えばかける2で8万円になるんではなくて、1万円しか増えないんですよ。で、子供が3人になると、3人目以降は6000円しか増えないんですね。もう本当に子供がたくさんいて、だからその3人子供を1人で育てるみたいなお母さんはもうちゃんと食べさせることが難しいぐらいに厳しいです。
On the streets of Ikebukuro, Kenji Seino and his volunteers find ways to get the rough sleepers off the streets. It usually starts by offering them with simple meals such as rice balls. Once trust is established, Mr. Seino and his staff will help with the paperwork. Their approach has proven successful that even former rough sleepers have now become their volunteers.
路上の経験がちょっとね何年かあって、その周りの生活スタンってところで、相談したのがきっかけで、それでいろいろ支援してもらって、あとこういうおにぎり作りとかですね、夜回りとかもあるんで参加させてもらった。
はい。じゃあまず東はどうですか？数いますか？どうしても今もですね、路上生活の人がですね、役所に支援を求めに行くと、なんか泥棒を見るような目でね、見ると、そういった役所、そういった担当者がいっぱいいます。
But there are those who prefer the streets where help is aplenty. This 67-year-old man used to work as a security guard before he quit following an injury. After 4 years of living on the streets, he's familiar with the help that's available. Today, for instance, they're distributing daily necessities such as masks and soaps. Some days he might even receive cash. Sometimes he helps volunteers to distribute food and get extra helpings, but not everyone is street smart.
これは10年ほど前にですね、我々は調査して明らかにしたんですね。精神障害も知的障害も非常にちょっとありえないの効率で高い率でね、パーセンテージで、路上生活をしていると。
As a single mother, Keiko realizes the grim future her children might face in Tokyo if she doesn't seek help.
一人親で、シングルマザーは特になんですけれども、批判されることが大変多いなっていうのを感じているので、シングルマザーっていうのはやっぱりものすごく大変で、全てを一人で担っているので、頑張っている人がいるんだなっていうことは伝えたいと思います。
At a tender age of 15, her eldest boy understands his mother's struggle. お母さんに甘えるタイプ？それともあんまり甘えないタイプ？いや、甘えないですね、全然。Those words from her son gave her strength and optimism. As the saying goes, sometimes the brightest light shines from the darkest corners. But there's still some way to go in addressing Japan's income inequality.